Welcome to McFly Angler. I've never been a guide, but I still enjoy teaching people how to catch more fish. So join me in this video where I show you how I tie this fly.
So technically we're tying two flies today. Well, two different techniques for the same fly, the woolly bugger. So we will start out with the easier and quicker way of tying these. You will want a long shank streamer hook like these from Risen. Place the hook in your vise securely. Then I personally like adding a little bit of weight with this 0.15 sized lead wire. About 10 or so wraps is sufficient to give this some weight. For thread, I like adding this vise 6/0, and I'm using olive for today's bugger. I find that the 6/0 is strong enough for this fly, but thin enough not to overbulk the head. Start your thread just behind the eye of the hook. Then loosely wrap it down and over the lead wire to hold it into place. Then you can come back up over the wire and smooth out that section with tighter wraps. End your thread at the start of the bend of the hook. Now we need some marabou, and any type will work. Today though, I'll be using the blood quill marabou, which tends to have more supple stems. Tie in the marabou extending out about a hook shank length past the end of the hook. So it can be tricky to tie the tail in, but do your best to wrap it up to about the lead wraps with tight wraps. Then cut the marabou off at an angle like so, and clean up that entire section with tight wraps. I always like adding a bit of flash. I find that one strand of crystal flash folded in half is enough to give flash to the tail. Tie it in on one side and then the other. Now traditionally these are tied with dubbing, but let's be honest, chenille is much easier and more common these days. I'm using the corrugated chenille in olive yellow. Clip off a strand a little longer than you think you need. In fact, this is enough for at least 2 of these buggers. Tie in your chenille so it extends most of the way up the hook shank in order to keep some of the taper. And then end with your thread back near the base of the tail. For hackle, you can use these bugger packs and they work just fine. However, I'm using a feather from this rooster saddle. Whichever you use, you want the feathers to be slightly tapered like so. You don't need the perfect dry fly hackle here. Also, you want the hackle to be about 2 times the hook gap. At least that's my preference. So now this is where the two techniques differ. For the easier technique, pull back the fibers on the tip of the feather, leaving a small tie-in point, and tie that into the base of the tail. Then bring your thread up to just behind the eye of the hook. Now wrap the chenille up the hook shank with touching wraps, completely covering the entire hook shank, and capture it tightly behind the eye of the hook. Trim off the waist and clean up the head slightly. Now grab the hackle feather and start palmering the hackle up the hook shank, stroking the fibers rearward as you go. When I reach the head, I like making 2 extra wraps there, to make the head more bushy. Up to you though. Capture the feather, trying not to trap any of the feather fibers, and this can be tricky. And then pull all the fibers rearward and clean up the head of the fly. Clip off the waist. Now you can whip finish your fly and add some head cement. Okay, now for the longer to tie, but in my opinion, more durable technique to tie this bugger. I won't bore you with the beginning since it's similar. Where this differs is how we tie in the hackle. One thing I want to mention though is that you can add cement to the base of the bugger with both versions like I did here with this one. I find it helps to keep the fly together just a little bit better. Okay, so we will add a little bit of the small sized wire. I am using a chartreuse color. Tie the wire in and put it aside for later. Then the chenille on top, like you did before. But bring your thread up to the eye of the hook and start wrapping your chenille up the fly like so. Now prepare the hackle feather. You want to have the shiny side of the feather facing you, and strip off the feathers on the top part. Then strip them off the bottom part as well, but leave a few more feathers on the bottom part than you did on the top. Now you can tie this feather in with X wraps right behind the eye of the hook, with the side that is stripped more facing away from you. Basically, the curve of the feather will be angling rearward, like so. Trim off the tag end of the feather after you secure it tightly, and then proceed to palmer the hackle down the hook shank. However, I like to make 2 extra wraps at the head of the fly here, and I also like to attach some hackle pliers to make the palmering easier. Now when you reach the tail, grab the wire and make counter wraps up the hook shank with it, wiggling it back and forth as you go to keep from trapping as many feather fibers. Once you reach the head of the fly, then capture the wire tightly and simply helicopter it off. Now you can whip finish your fly and add head cement. And make sure you clip off the excess feather of the tail. And there we have it, the more durable version of the bugger. No matter which version you tie, it will fish awesomely. Woolly buggers have to be one of the most versatile streamer patterns ever created. They catch just about any species and are quite easy to tie, even if you choose the wire technique. And you guys can make your own decisions on which technique you want to use to tie them. And please let me know in the comments section on which you like best. By the way, I've been working with Risen for a while now, and I really like their gear. Not only do they sell good quality hooks at great prices, but also other fly tying materials and even gear like rods, reels, and line, and stream side accessories. So go to www.risenfly.com and type in McFly at checkout to get a discount on their already great priced equipment. I will see you on the next video. Now you go catch some fish.